Now is Iowa Republican Representative Steve King. Good morning, Congressman.
Good morning, Allison.
So let's talk about some of these new cabinet picks. We'll get to Scott Pruitt, but let's start with General John Kelly. He's been tapped for DHS. How do you think General Kelly will change the Department of Homeland Security?
Well, we know about General John Kelly's military experience and his record there, and being the decorated veteran of combat over in Iraq in particular. In fact, that's where I first met him, was when Ramadi was shot to shambles, and I'll say during the surge era, and we took an MRAP ride around there. That even a minaret was shot in half, and he pointed to that and said, "We were taking fire from that minaret, and my son took that down with a 20-millimeter cannon." That's my first impression of John Kelly.
Wow.
I've met him several times since then. And I know that he will take command of the DHS. And in the Department of Homeland Security, in each agency that's there, there's a morale problem. It's a different morale problem in each one. And I think if you serve under John Kelly, your morale is going to be good. It'd probably be a direct order: shape up your morale. and so he understands command. He understands how to delegate. And I think that he will bring law and order. And what I'm hoping for with this is that the restoration of the rule of law, especially with regard to immigration, that is the main principle that needs to be driven by the Secretary of Homeland Security.
Okay, let's talk about that. Will he build a wall?
If his order from the president is to build a wall, John Kelly will build a wall. And I've got a design out there, and I hope it's considered. There are other good designs out there, but he will get it done. He's a doer. I don't have any doubt about that. President-elect Trump has said, who knows, thousands of times, "I will build a wall." Well, he didn't just say he'd build a wall. He said, "I'll build a great wall, and it'll be a beautiful wall, and I'll make the Mexicans pay for it." I don't know that John Kelly will figure out how to make the Mexicans pay for it, but I think he will do all the rest.
Well, because President-elect Trump said it so many times, it was confusing yesterday when Congressman Dennis Ross, Republican, one of your colleagues, said this to Bloomberg. Let me read it for you. "The wall is a term to help understand it, to describe it. It could be an open surveillance to prevent people from crossing. It does not mean an actual wall." Congressman, is the wall an actual wall?
I would say to my friend Dennis that that's newspeak. It's when you say a wall's not a wall, then what is anything?
I don't know.
When you say a wall, you mean a wall. If you want to build a fence, you say fence. You don't use it as a euphemism for a virtual, say, surveillance from hot air balloons that are floating over the border, which some people have advocated. And I'll say this: the cheapest and most effective thing we can do is build a concrete wall, a precast structural concrete wall. I know that there's equipment out there that could form in place and trench a foundation for a wall. You could drop the slots in. You could build. Our little company could build a mile a day of that.
Sure. So your belief today, as you stand here, is that there will be an actual, literal wall built along our southern border,
made out of concrete. And I'm calling upon President-elect Trump to not just settle for a wall. Let's build a fence, then a wall, then a fence, so we create two no man's lands, one on either side of the wall. That way, when we pick people up there, they don't really have an excuse. They weren't out there picking mushrooms. They're illegally in the United States. It'll simplify the adjudication, and it'll expedite the voluntary return, and it will allow our Border Patrol officers to patrol both sides of that wall, and we can put surveillance devices on top of the wall, vibration detectors and other devices, Allison.
Okay, that's a super duper wall. That's a fence wall fence that you're talking about. So let me get your clarification on something else about immigration. As you know, Mr. Trump, during the campaign, said a couple of different things about the level of deportation and who would be deported. As you understand it today, Congressman, will the so-called dreamers, the people who were brought here as minors, will they be deported, or will he find a way to allow them to become citizens and stay in the U.S.?
Maybe there's a place in between on that, too, but I'll try to hit each spot. First, if I listen to his campaign promises, I would expect that on the first day he would cancel all of the DAPA and all of the DACA documents out there that President Obama unconstitutionally issued. And that would end it for them. And then as they're encountered by law enforcement, local law enforcement often, then they would be put through the process. That's what we would expect from his campaign promises.
Okay, let me stop you right there, because I want to read to you what President-elect Donald Trump said in an interview to Time magazine yesterday, because it's different than what you're describing. He says, we're going to work something out that's going to make people happy and proud. They were brought here at a very young age. They've worked here. They've gone to school here. Some were good students. Some have wonderful jobs. And they're in Never Never Land because they don't know what's going to happen. That sounds like he is not going to cancel DACA, the executive order of President Obama. That sounds like he is sympathetic to their cause.
Well, I was hoping he would say, we're going to do something that makes Steve King happy, but I didn't hear that.
Yes, strangely.
When you look at this, I think that there's been such a hard push on this. They're called dreamers because that's the most sympathetic term that could be applied to.
And it sounds like Mr. Trump agrees with that. I mean, he's talking about the merits of keeping them here.
Well, among all of these dreamers, there are some awfully bad people. And these dreamers go on up to the age of 37 or 38 or maybe older. And that's if they tell the truth.
But I mean, what's your example that there's awfully bad dreamers here?
I'm sorry?
Well, give me an example of there being terrible dreamers.
Well, I'll just say this, that I've spent a fair amount of time down at the border. I've been down there and helped arrest people that are smuggling in. I have watched as these packs of marijuana are on the backs of young men that are walking across the border. They're hauling an average of about 65 pounds, and some of them every day they take another load. Okay, so you think that you think those drug traffickers are what are referred to as the dreamers who were brought here against their will as minors and now go to school here and have jobs? No, but wait. This definition about against their will, that's a made-up term. Did any of those little kids say I didn't want to come here? Or did any of them that came in the day before they turned 18, they qualify too? Did they say I was brought here against my will? No, some of them were walking across the border on their own, lots of them. And we'll see them coming across every day at McAllen, Texas. They're still pouring across the border. They know what they're doing. It's not against their will. And they came here to live in the shadows. So if we enforce the law and they live in the shadows, that's what they came here to do.
What about those who are under, I mean, let's pick an arbitrary number, under 10 years old. Did they come of their own free will?
Well, let's ask their parents. And will those children point to their parents and tell us, you really need to enforce the law against my parents because they knew what they were doing when they caused me to break the law? So I don't think we've thought through this very well, but there's a reason why in the president's DACA and DAPA programs he didn't grant his unconstitutional executive amnesty to the parents of dreamers. He would have liked to. But they're unspoken to out there. They're the facilitators then. If the kids are innocent, the parents are guilty, we have to look at the parents.
So just so I understand your position on this, even if it differs from President-elect Trump, you're saying that if a child was brought here as an infant, a 2-year-old, a 7-year-old, a 10-year-old, regardless of if they're in college, regardless of if they've made something good with their life and if they're working here, they have to go.
That is the law. And if he's going to change that, he needs to come to Congress and ask us to change the law. But I don't think you get that ask unless you first enforce the law. You've secured the border. And still, wherever this does to our hearts, and it tugs on mine too, but the most important thing is to restore the respect for the rule of law. And we fail to do that if we reward people for breaking it. And so, in the end, what was all this about? I've worked 30 years to try to restore the respect for the rule of law because of Ronald Reagan's amnesty in 1986. And I don't want to let this go because somebody's heart got a little softer than it was before the election.
Okay. Congressman Steve King, we appreciate your candor, and we will see how this all plays out in Congress in the next months. Thanks so much.